If tranquility and beauty could suddenly turn into chaos and panic, it was seen on the tragic day of December 7, 1941, the day when Japan waged war on the U.S. and targeted a U.S. Navy base called Pearl Harbor on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. This surprise attack shook America to its core, leading to an even bigger war that changed everything. Let's have a look at what the attack on Pearl Harbor was like, what came right after the attack, and how badly it affected everything. So stay with me till the end of the video to learn all about it. In the years leading up to the devastating events of December 7, 1941, tensions between Japan and the United States had been simmering beneath the surface. You see, at the time, Japanese leaders wanted to expand their power in the Asia-Pacific region. Like many nations, Japan sought to secure access to vital resources such as oil, minerals, and food to support its growing population and industrialization. Now, Japanese intentions clashed with American interests directly, especially as Japan advanced into territories like China and French Indochina. In response, American President Franklin D. Roosevelt imposed economic sanctions like an embargo on exports of oil, scrap iron, and steel. All of these things were critical resources for Japan's military and industrial efforts. They tried to solve the issue with diplomacy and talks, but how many times have talks been enough to nip a conflict in the bud? The tension between Japan and America grew and became a solid conflict. Both nations geared up for war, setting the stage for a catastrophic showdown. Japan had realized that the U.S. wasn't going to back down, and Japanese military leaders meticulously planned to attack Pearl Harbor on Oahu Island in Hawaii to ripple the American Pacific Fleet and secure Japan's regional dominance. Although there were several intelligence indicators that hinted at a potential Japanese attack, they weren't taken seriously or even analyzed. For example, some Japanese communications were intercepted that hinted at an upcoming attack, but the exact target and timing remained unclear. And we can't forget that we are talking about the start of the 1940s. Although radar technology was available at the time, its capabilities were limited compared to modern-day radar systems. What's more, the radar installations around Pearl Harbor were not fully operational during the attack, and those that were had limited range and coverage. And frankly, nobody among American military leaders and personnel stationed at Pearl Harbor and Oahu Island really thought that such an attack could even happen. All these limitations were the reason why American forces couldn't detect the approaching Japanese planes. The radar operators thought the planes were a flight of American B-17 bombers expected to arrive from the mainland, but they were not. This mistaken identity was going to become a disaster less than an hour later. Please take 2 seconds to help me out and hit the like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Each like and subscribe helps support this channel and keeps me motivated to keep making you valuable content. Thank you. Now back to the video. Some veterans present at the harbor on 7th December 1941 recall watching planes in the sky and thinking, why are we having a practice drill on Sunday? Now, everybody on the ground became alert and extremely scared, but no action was taken. The planes came right on top of them. Everybody looked up, and there it was. Wings bearing the red circle, which was the unmistakable symbol of the rising sun of the Japanese flag. This was no practice. Japan had indeed attacked them. The flying planes were actually a fleet of about 180 Imperial Japanese Navy's first air fleet launched from 6 aircraft carriers positioned 230 miles north of the island. And it was just the first wave of attack, which was followed by another 170 aircrafts. The Japanese fighter and torpedo planes broke the silence on the early morning and started bombarding the unsuspecting naval base at Pearl Harbor at 7:48 a.m. This was a total shock for everybody. The time was carefully calculated to exploit the element of surprise and maximize damage. After the attack on Pearl Harbor began, it took approximately 30 minutes to alert President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The White House received a phone message from the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, that read, "Air raid on Pearl Harbor. This is not a drill." No head of state wants to hear the news that his country is under attack. But President Roosevelt quickly realized the seriousness of the situation and swiftly declared war on Japan. On the 8th of December, President Roosevelt delivered a speech in which he declared the day as a date which will live in infamy. At the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor, it housed the U.S. Pacific Fleet, which was one of the most significant naval forces in the Pacific Ocean. Pearl Harbor served as a major hub for the American military, hosting battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, and aircraft. Japan had targeted America's vital strategic asset in the Pacific region. As the first Japanese dive bomber pierced through the silent Sunday skies, American battleships, cruisers, and various airfields at the base were struck by torpedoes and bombs. For the next half hour, the airfields and ships docked at the harbor faced a merciless shower of bombs, gunfire, and torpedoes. Japanese planes specifically targeted key military installations. It was pure chaos and destruction, with explosions ripping through the harbor and engulfing ships in flames. At 8:10 a.m., an 1,800-pound bomb smashed through the deck of the USS Arizona battleship. It was a symbol of American naval power and was among the vessels severely damaged, ultimately sinking into the sea. Over 1,000 men that got trapped inside the ship went down with it into the ocean. Another battleship, USS Oklahoma, got attacked by torpedoes, which exploded and went down, taking another 400 men on board. USS Utah faced a similar fate, and as a result, around 60 men lost their lives. At 8:50 a.m., a second wave of Japanese planes came ready for yet more destruction. And by the time the Japanese withdrew shortly after 9 a.m., they had created enough havoc and weakened the American naval presence in the Pacific. Over 300 aircraft had been destroyed, and nearly 320 ships lay damaged or sunk in the harbor's waters. The toll of the attack was staggering. 2 hours of a constant rain of bombs and bullets in the sky created a human loss that was on another level. Over 2,400 U.S. military personnel and civilians lost their lives. The neighboring civilian population suffered destruction from stray bombs and gunfire, with homes, businesses, and public buildings facing damage. Following the attack, the United States government made sure they implemented enough measures to really strengthen national security and maintain order. First of all, they imposed a strict curfew in Hawaii and other vulnerable areas, restricting the movement of civilians during nighttime hours. It was intended to prevent espionage activities and to ensure the safety of the population until the tension subsided. Then, people were supposed to observe blackout measures, which included turning off all lights at night to minimize the risk of enemy air raids. Furthermore, martial law was declared in Hawaii shortly after the attack, granting the military sweeping powers to maintain control and protect against potential threats. This meant that people lost their liberties, and the military could assume control over people's affairs. FBI agents were sent to Hawaii, and working alongside the military, they rounded up over 2,000 people within the next 40 hours of the attack. The worst was faced by the residents with a Japanese descent. Although they were American citizens, still, their lineage made them suspicious. Many Japanese Americans experienced increased hostility and discrimination. And because they were under martial law, they couldn't defend their rights under habeas corpus or trial by jury. Many people even hid anything that connected them to Japan and even stopped speaking in Japanese. The island of Hawaii had about 35% people of Japanese descent, and all of them were made to hand over banned items. This included radios, binoculars, and any kind of firearms. The military wasn't taking any risks. President Roosevelt issued Order 9066, which authorized the relocation and confinement of about 120,000 Japanese Americans, forcing families to leave their homes and livelihoods behind and relocate to remote internment camps. Despite the lack of evidence of wrongdoing or disloyalty, Japanese Americans were subject to indefinite detention based solely on their ancestry. The attack on Pearl Harbor brought America out of neutrality and thrust it into World War II. Within days, the United States officially entered the war by committing its military and industrial might to the Allies. And we all know how tragic the war was and how it ended. The US forced Japan to finally surrender using nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The Pearl Harbor attack remains to this day a defining moment in world geopolitics, and as a memorial to this day, the USS Arizona Monument is present at the site sunken in the water of Pearl Harbor. It spans over the sunken hull of the battleship. Despite past conflicts, Japan and the US now have a deep cultural and economic relationship, and we see them promoting mutual understanding and cooperation. And the education curriculums in both countries emphasize reconciliation rather than animosity, focusing on shared values and interests. This brings us to the end of this video. What do you have to say about this historic day? Tell us in the comments. That's it for today. Check out this video on our channel next.